What's going on, guys? We're back in the shop again. We're working on that M52. We're going to continue assembling this for that RX8 we're going to be swapping this into. The next step that we're going to take is we always put a oil pump chain tensioner on the engine. These are pretty notorious for the chains. They say spinning the nut off the oil pump. What actually well, that does happen, but what actually causes that is the slack in the oil pump chain slaps around and then allows that vibration to cause the nut to back itself off. So a lot of people like weld the nut on, they'll safety wire the nut and stuff like that. The best practice is to change the chain, change the gear that it rides on the crank. Same with the oil pump gear. Or upgrade to a better oil pump. Seems Legit Garage has one of those as well. And then put the chain tensioner on there. This engine didn't come with one like the S54s and things like that did. This one does not. So we're going to go ahead and add that to this engine. I have this in my personal car and my personal engine that I've built. And I haven't had any issues with oil pumps or anything like that. So it works really well. It's pretty straightforward to install. You do have to drill the block, so you'd have to mark it and make sure that you get it in the appropriate place. They send it a template with it. I've run into issues with templates sometimes just don't really line up that great. It's always best to measure it out with a digital set of calipers or some sort of measurement tool to make sure you get it in the right spot. So what we have here, as you can see, I've already marked these. They send this template with it, but it essentially, when you line it up, moves the hole right into, at least on this engine, maybe it's different for some other ones, but there's a rib right back here. Kind of tough to see. Let me grab a light. With some light on the subject here, you can see with these ribs that I'm talking about, this rib coming down and then this rib down below it. The bottom hole essentially will end up like right above and right to the right side of that side rib. And this template would have put it right into this rib. I'm not sure. Like I said, it could just be different for other engines. So what I did is I just went ahead and I grabbed my set of calipers. I stuck it down in here and measured the depth of where that bottom rib is. And then lined up exactly where I have this side rib right here. Then I went ahead and I just set my caliper here and then took the drill bit and kind of made sure I can mark the depth. Turn that off there. So we can mark the depth here, and then you can see I marked the bottom line and then marked the hole where it should be, and then I use the template to mark the second hole for the tensioner spring. So I just marked where that hole should be. Like that, and make sure it's nice and level, and then mark this upper hole. Now we're going to go ahead and drill these guys out. So the other day we got the holes drilled out in the block for the oil pump tensioner. Today we got Alex here. This is his engine. We are building it for his RX8. So we went ahead and we installed the oil drive, oil pump, and the tensioner. You can see there. You want to make sure that this tensioner gets on here nice and straight. It comes with a few washers. You may or may not use them all. Just make sure you get this to be the chain on the tensioner as center as possible, so that it puts good tension on there and rides on this tensioner very well. So we're going to continue putting in the oil pan and the timing cover first, and then we'll get the oil pan on this thing. we got all the oil drive stuff put on. We put the timing chain set in, so the guides, the chain, and then we cleaned up the timing cover. We got that bolted on, and then we're working on cleaning up the oil pan. That's what Alex is doing over there. All the fun scrubbing stuff. Make sure you always put your customers to work. It's always good. Just kidding, don't do that. He's a friend. Next we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the cut ring head gasket on this. We do use the CES Motorsports cut ring gasket, so we'll put that on, and then we'll get the head put on here. We are going to do ARP head studs on this. Again, like we covered in the video doing the bottom end, make sure you use the lubricant on the studs when you thread them in, and then also when you put the nuts on. And then make sure you follow the torque instructions on that. With the cut ring head gasket, you're going to want to torque it down, but after you run the engine, get it heat cycled, you're going to want to modify a socket for it and actually get that retorqued after you heat cycle that head gasket. That's going to ensure that gasket seats properly and seals up good for you. Okay, we got the head gasket on here. We're just going to go ahead and make sure we install all our studs. They do have an Allen on the top of them. They're not used to be torqued or anything. You just finger tight these guys in here. They don't need to be super tight. Just finger tight to the bottom. That's all we're trying to do. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to set this the head on here in a moment. We'll film that, and then I'll show you the torquing process. We'll go from there. Got the head set on here. I did get the washers put in here for the ARP head studs. You want to make sure you wipe off all the grease off the washers before you put lubricant on there. Same with the nuts. Make sure you wipe down the bottom side of these nuts. Then you're going to put lubricant on the threads of the studs and then on the bottom of the nuts, and then start threading them down. And then just follow the torque procedure on the ARP instructions. Took a couple days off, get a couple other projects done, but we're back in here. We're going to start putting the cams into this engine. We are going to use an M54 B30 intake cam for the intake side, and then we're still waiting for our M50 non-Vanos intake cam to put on the exhaust side to go in. But what we got to do first is we have to machine down the Vanos gear drive that's on the front of the M54 intake cam, because it is too long. Best practices, take this to a machine shop, get it milled down. Worst case scenario, you can kind of grind it off. I wouldn't recommend it because then it's not very precise and or smooth. So we're going to go ahead and take this down to the machine shop. Once I get that back, we'll get that installed, and I'll show you my procedure of getting the cam trays in and stuff like that. Okay, you can see our cam here. This is the M54 B30 cam. You can see it has this kind of a lip here sticking past the bolt. What we need to do, this lip here, what we need to do is make that match the M52 cam. So the best thing to do is to measure this this spline with a set of calipers, and then make this match that same exact depth. Best way to do that is, like I said, take it to machine shop, tell them how much you need to turn it down, have them machine this face down, and make sure it's exactly what you need. Okay, so for getting the cam tray set up, we're going to make sure we get a bunch of assembly lube in the lifter holes, make sure that that's really well lubricated. Then we'll get it set in onto the head, and then we'll make sure that our cam journals are very, very super well lubricated before we put the cam in there. And then I'll show you putting the cam and stuff like that in there. We have custom timing blocks from Perry Hubling, Alien Motorsports, I believe. He came out with these 3D printed blocks you can get to retime your cams, especially the M54 and the M50 non-Vanos, since you can't use the stock locking tools once you do the M50 non-Vanos. So super, super helpful. I'll show you those as well. Right now we're just going to get everything lubricated, get this cam tray in, and then get this intake cam in. All right, got those all lubed up. We're gonna go ahead and get this the lifter set in here, and then we'll get this set on the head. Okay, you can see I tilted the engine over to the side a bit. This helps setting the cam tray in a lot. That way the lifters don't try to slide out of the cam tray. And that way you can kind of just set it in there nice and easy. Now that we have that cam tray in here, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we lube up all these journals here. And then we'll get the cam just set on there. And then we'll lube up the caps and get the caps tightened down for this side. Got the intake cam here installed. You can see we're using that 12-degree advanced timing block. Just make sure you take your time installing these cams. You don't want to crack one. Just tighten it down very evenly and slowly until it gets all the way down and you're nice and tight. Cruising along on this engine. I am just waiting for, like I said, the M50 intake cam to put on the exhaust side, and then we'll use the Alien Engineering timing block to get that set in there appropriately. And then we'll continue getting this thing prepped up. So while we're waiting for the exhaust cam to show up for this engine, we're going to go ahead and we're going to rebuild the Vanos unit. We do use Bison Systems kits, and then he does have a really good write-up on it. If you're not comfortable doing it yourself, send me a message. We're happy to do a core exchange rebuild for you so you don't have to mess with it, and then you just go ahead and install it on your car. It's going to help with a lot of power loss issues. The seals in these things get rock solid and they start passing oil past them. They don't allow the Vanos to engage as well as it should. Also, you get a lot of rattle from some of these units once they start to wear. They do provide an anti-rattle kit for those, and we're going to go ahead and install that in this as well. Okay, so as far as getting this car ready, what I did is I removed the sway bar for now, and then I went ahead and I dropped this rack and pinion down so that that's out of the way. There's a few options for the rack and pinion on this car that you can do depending on what swap you're doing. There are some that relocate the rack and pinion down in the subframe, and then there's some that you can do like a subframe conversion to do a BMW E36 rack and pinion. That's going to be the route we're going to go. We're going to use the WavyGenesis kit so that we can have that in there. This is going to be a drift car, so we want to make sure we get a rack in here that's going to be really good for drifting, so we're going to go that route. If you're keeping the electronic steering, just make sure you move it down. It should clear everything. We're going to test that through here shortly. As I was saying before, I went ahead and I got the rack and pinion out of the way. I've got the sway bar out of the way. I've got this all kind of cleaned up. I did cut out the bar that runs across right here. Obviously, that's going to have to be out of the way to be able to fit a bigger engine in here, and obviously get it to sit low enough in the engine bay to clear the hood and everything else. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to get the transmission bolted onto the engine, and then we're going to set this in here and see what the engine looks like and figure out our mounting situation. Gonna go ahead and wrap up this video here. Next up's gonna be doing the engine mounts and transmission mounts. I am gonna show you the engine in the car. We did have to do a little bit of trimming to a few things. I'll cover that stuff in the next video.